All right, let's get started with how to score a board, how to cut a board. First thing you want to do is kind of line the ruler up, a metal ruler preferably, to the lines that you've made on the board, your measurements, and then do a couple light passes. Don't try to cut it all at once. Now, my ruler moved a little bit, so I'm repositioning it, pressing down really hard on the ruler and pressing down a little bit lighter on the actual knife, okay? Take like 5 or 6 passes. Go slow, and before you know it, you're right through the board. Just take your time with it. Now, if you sometimes, when you do this, you get like a little bird edge, and you just want to take some very fine sandpaper. The sandpaper that I'm using in this video is 2 coarse. I had one lying around, so I just grabbed it to show you for the demo. You want to use like a 400 grit. I think what I have there is like a 100 or a 200. That's just way too coarse. It just smooths out the edge of your board. It's really good for masonite as well. So now we're ready to gesso, and you can see I put down in this first pass through with the gesso, I put down way too much gesso. Okay, so for the next minute or so, I'm gonna fix the mistake that I made of putting too much gesso down. Now, not the end of the world. I'm just going to brush it back and forth, and my goal here is just to get rid of all of the brush strokes from the brush, okay? I don't want texture on my board. Now, you might want texture on your board, so then it's okay if you use a lot of gesso like this. I'm just not a big fan of gesso, and not that I'm not a big fan of gesso, I'm not a big fan of texture. And there I am again, wiping the board with the brush, getting the excess gesso off of the brush, going back and forth, getting rid of all my brush strokes. This is just one pass. You want to use a lot of water on that brush. You want to water down the gesso. Make sure you hit the sides. I'm still taking paint off the brush. Going back and forth, once again, knocking down my brush strokes. Due to the glare of the window that's in front of me, I'm really seeing a lot of brush strokes. So I'm just very lightly pressing down. Don't press down hard at the end. Press down hard on your brush at the beginning of the gessoing process. Okay, this is great if you're going to gesso a bunch of small boards. I wouldn't recommend this process if you're going to be working on big boards. And I shouldn't be doing these little touch-ups that I'm doing right now. I should be done. The reason why I'm doing these touch-ups is because I just use way too much gesso. Okay, sometimes when you overuse the brush, what you do is you create even more texture. So a lot of this was the fixing of the mistakes. Now, just make sure that you hit the sides of the board too. So I'm going to flip it once it's dry. Okay, you can see how it's warped. It warps because there's only gesso on one side. So now we need to balance that out. So I'm using way less gesso this time. So I've got my water on the brush. I'm just going to go back and forth once again. Now the warping of the board is not going to go away immediately. It will go away once the board dries. Okay, you want to gesso your board evenly on both sides. You don't want to do just one side to be conservative with the gesso and to save a little money. You want to hit both sides. The goal here is to seal the paper so we preserve the paper board. Air is going to disintegrate the paper board, and so is sunlight. So our main objective with the gesso is to seal it in. Okay, sealing the paper. And also, we don't want the oil from the oil paint and the thinners to disintegrate the paper either. So we're going to just hit it on both sides and on the edges. And I wound up doing 3 coats of gesso. I could do more, but 3 coats of gesso is sufficient for this process. I'm going back. This one took a whole lot less time. It's a whole lot less messy doing it with a little less gesso. Okay, so now, our next step, once this dries, is to do our gessoing brushstrokes in the opposite direction. So we've flipped our board once again. We're going to use a little bit of gesso. That's a good amount because this is our second coat now on this first side, and I'm going to go in the opposite direction, just trying to make more of like a canvas type texture. It's just good for the board for flattening purposes, and it's also very good for the texture that you do it equally both sides. Okay, so I'm just gonna go a little bit slower because this is a great way to get splattered gesso all over your clothes. I recommend wearing a light t-shirt when you're doing this process. Make sure you hold that board, and I'm gessoing on a very clean, flat piece of cardboard. You can gesso, you can see underneath everything. I have a whole nother piece of Strathmore illustration board under there that I put my drawings on top of. So this one went much smoother. You can see I'm actually almost done. I'm hitting the sides, making sure that I get those sides, and that is our gessoing process. What you want to remember is less is best, and you just want to seal the board on both sides. 2 to 3 coats, 4 coats is more than enough. With masonite, you're going to need a little bit more. All right, so thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next part.